Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another two amazing guests to introduce to you now. Oliver Seligman did not think for one second that he would become a writer, let alone the author of three books. Graduating with a bachelor's degree in zoology, he found himself working as a sales trader in investment banks in London and New York City. Although he wanted to make millions, retire by 35, and live happily ever after, it didn't work out that way. Bored, disillusioned, and lacking purpose, he stumbled across a pair of mysterious, meditating monks who taught him how to find peace, and he never looked back. In Oliver's latest book, Befriending Bipolar, A Patient's Perspective, he describes what it's like to experience madness from the inside. Diagnosed with bipolar type 1 at 17, he has battled euphoric manias, suicidal depressions, bewildering psychoses, and the side effects of medication for over 30 years. Wow. In Befriending Bipolar, Oliver reveals how he found peace with an illness that destroys lives and sometimes ends them. Recently, he has been the recipient of the 2024 Fresh Start Award, which includes a $10,000 grant to promote metabolic psychiatry given out by the wonderful nonprofit Metabolic Mind. You can find Oliver on his website at www.oliverseligman.com and also on his YouTube channel, Thriving with Bipolar. We are also joined by Ellen, Oliver's lovely wife of 11 years, who are calling in from Norway. It's so wonderful to have both of you, Oliver and Ellen. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show today at Boundless Body Radio.
It's a pleasure.
It's such an honor to host you. Ellen, have you ever done a podcast before? Is this kind of your first time?
I've done like a sort of a couple of short ones.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can call them podcasts, I don't know. I've been into it in this way, yes.
Awesome. Well, we're so glad that you're joining us today. Oliver, I've heard you tell your story on several podcasts you've been hosted on, and I think it's a really wonderful story. But I've also really appreciated that mental illness, and in particular bipolar, it really affects all the people around just the person, not only the person that's suffering, but also the family, the caretakers, the children. All those relationships can be very, very complicated and tricky with this going on. And so I really appreciate having both of you to come on today to talk about your journey. Oliver, I want to start with you. We're going to skip way, way ahead for just a moment. I want to know what it was like to find out that you had actually won the grant for the Fresh Start Award, and we were awarded $10,000 to help move this message forward.
I actually burst into tears.
Ah.
I was so happy, and I so appreciated it, and just that level of generosity, to give a complete stranger $10,000 to move forward in their life, and for me, a big part of it is moving forward with getting out there and talking about bipolar and talking about the ketogenic diet and other strategies that I've kind of come across. So yeah, it was amazing. I'm still, whenever I think about it, I just feel warm inside. It's just amazing. So hugely, hugely grateful for that. Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's been such a cool experience to get to talk to a lot of the Fresh Start Award winners. I think you're either the seventh or eighth person that's won the award that I've been able to speak with. And there's an overwhelming feeling from each of you, I think, that is like you feel seen or heard, or somebody is finally recognizing some of your work. You've obviously written about this in your book, and that's one way to get your message out. But that sense of like, wow, somebody recognizes how difficult this is, the things that I've gone through, and is awarding you for wanting to continue to push this message forward. That's definitely something that's really stuck out to me.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's funny, because me personally and a lot of people with mental illnesses, they look fine most of the time. And particularly when they're with friends or when they're in public or when they're doing stuff like, you can't often really tell unless someone's in the middle of a proper episode. And so a lot of the time you don't get the sympathy or the allowances that someone with a broken leg would get, or someone, who had lost their hair because of chemotherapy or whatever. So getting that kind of recognition was a far bigger deal for me than I realized. I didn't realize that I'd been holding it together a lot more than I realized, basically. And I don't regret that. I think that you kind of got to do that. You've got to get on with life. But it was just like, wow. I think that's why I burst out into tears. I was just like, wow, someone actually gets what's been going on and realizes what can really help, which is basically a bunch of money and a bit of direction with it. It was very cool.
That's so cool. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Ellen, how about you? What was your reaction when you found out that Oliver had won the grant?
Well, I was obviously super happy. I sort of suspected that he would get it, if I'm honest, because I thought he was really deserving of it. And so, but yeah, it really meant a lot to have that acknowledgement, you know, and also giving a direction that this is a good direction to go forward in, you know, like a confirmation that this is seen, and it helps, you know, it's worthwhile, and their support along the way, that meant a lot. So I think it gave Oliver and us as a couple like a clarity of direction in a way.
Mm.
So it was very cool.
That's very cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Well, to get to the good part of the story, I've learned that we have to wallow around in the dark side of the story. You've dealt with this for a long time. In the introduction, we said over 30 years. I believe it's over 35 now, or close to 35 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's 32 years since I got
32.
diagnosed. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
quite a
two
while.
long sentences. It's quite impressive. I could have
Oh my
murdered two people and I'd be out of jail.
goodness. That's fantastic. Well, I'm glad you didn't.
Me
So that's a
too.
good thing. You too. Oh man. Let's talk about your story, Oliver. When did the kind of like mental health component start showing up in your life as something that was negative and really impacting you?
I think probably when I was really young, I used to get these things called hairy fits. That's what my mum called them. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night with like a nightmare that I couldn't wake from. And I would just be screaming and screaming and screaming. And I was completely inconsolable. And every so often, my parents would have to take me off school because I just got so kind of intense into everything, and I was pretty neurotic, to be honest. And so I would just need to rest and have a couple of days at home just doing nothing, and then I could go back and join in with life. And one thing I remember was I remember looking at my friends. A lot of my friends were very laid back. I think I really like laid back people. I was probably attracted to them because I was missing it. And I couldn't understand how they could relax in the way they did. I just did not know how to do it because if I lay in the sun, my head was just going at 100 miles an hour, and I would just feel intense and I had to do something. And that was from a pretty young age. So I think there were signs there. Of course, it could have gone another way, and I could have grown up and grown out of those habits, but it seemed like they were precursors to bipolar, or at least the potential for it.
Yeah, sure. When was the actual diagnosis of bipolar?
I had a manic episode when I was 17, and I think I got diagnosed about 2 months later.
Mm. You would
Mm.
be a good person to ask this. Can you explain the difference between bipolar type 1 and bipolar type 2?
Yeah, I think so. Bipolar type 1 essentially has psychoses in it. And that is when one becomes completely disconnected with reality. Whereas bipolar type 2 tends to have more depression. And there isn't usually mania in bipolar type 2, but there can be hypomania, which is like a milder version of mania, which can be really fun and really enjoyable, but it can also be incredibly damaging.
Mm.
And back to bipolar type 1, you have the psychoses. You do have the depressions too. I've had a lot of depressions, but the main feature of it, I think, generally is manias. And when someone's manic, it's like they are going at 100 miles an hour, and they can make a lot of big mistakes, and they can think they're Jesus, and they can spend a lot of money, and they can sleep around, and life gets pretty wild. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for explaining that. I always get the two kind of twisted up. Can you describe a little bit more what the psychoses are like? This sounds a bit scary. And alongside that, I would love to know, like, are you fully aware that this is going on and you're unable to control it, or do you sort of lose your sense of reality completely?
Yeah, that's a good question. At some point, I always lose my sense of reality. At some point, the illness just takes me. But I think because I've been doing a lot of meditation, I've been meditating for 23 years now, a meditation called the Ashire's Ascension. And that has helped me become a lot more aware of what's going on inside me. And it's helped me become a lot more aware of thoughts versus reality. And so if, for example, a psychosis starts to creep up on me, then I would start having weird thoughts about vampires and werewolves. I'd start to get a bit of anxiety, just gentle anxiety, and then it would just become more and more intense. But I'm extremely aware of when the warning signs come. And so it's very easy for me just to notice that. And I'd usually say to Ellen, I'd say, oh, this is a bit weird. Let's see what happens. And if those thoughts and the fear get worse or they hang around, then that evening or the next day I'll take antipsychotics for just 3 or 4 days usually, and I'm absolutely fine. I haven't had to do that for, I think, 7 years now, which is really, really good. But the meditation's been a huge part of just becoming more aware of what's going on inside me and also having a peaceful place to live from when I'm well. What was the other part of your question? I forgot the first bit.
I mean, just if you're like fully conscious of when you go into a psychotic event, they sound really scary. Just yeah, with what it's like to actually be there and how aware you are of that happening. It sounds like the meditation was hugely helpful for that.
Yeah, well, in my book, I talk about 2 types of psychosis that I've classified. Um, Not that I'm necessarily particularly qualified to invent new types of psychosis, as I have absolutely no mental health training whatsoever. But I thought it would be helpful to do that. And I classify them into the first type is thought-based psychoses. Now, this is when your mind starts telling you things that are pretty weird that you believe. Now, for an average person, if their mind starts telling them weird things, they will just dismiss it. They won't really think about it. But a psychosis, it starts to crawl its way into your mind by telling you, you need to be afraid of these people. You need to be afraid of these people. And I think that he's looking at you and she's looking at you and oh my God, they're in the CIA and they know what you've done. And so it kind of creeps into your psyche. And very quickly I would become pretty paranoid. I had one psychotic episode where at the start of the episode, I wasn't sure if I had raped this girl or not. I kind of knew I hadn't, because I hadn't. But my mind started to try and say, well, maybe she'll say you did, and maybe you did actually, and you've forgotten, and all this weird stuff. And then within a couple of days, I absolutely thought that I had, and I was terrified that the police were going to come and arrest me. And I ended up in a mental hospital, luckily. But I wouldn't speak to any of the doctors or nurses for 2 or 3 days because I thought the whole mental hospital was a prison that was being disguised as a hospital, and all the doctors were police and they were trying to trick me into confessing. So that's a thought-based psychosis. And as you can imagine, for different people, they take completely different themes, but it's pretty scary, and it's also pretty scary for the people around you because they start to see that this is weird. He's not quite there. The second type of psychosis that I talk about, I call it a total psychosis. And I only experienced this when I was coming off medication and I either was reacting to coming off it or I was having some big detox, or I've been told different theories by different experts, and I don't know for sure what's true. But in those psychoses, it would be like we're talking now and suddenly bang, I jump into another realm and there's dragons and lizards flying around, or there's angels singing, or I'm in hell and I see, demons and things coming after me, or and that kind of psychosis was just, I was completely unconscious that I was in a psychosis. In the thought-based psychosis, at the start, particularly once it had happened a few times, I got to know this is coming, and I could tell Ellen, or I could tell the doctor, or I could take the antipsychotics or whatever. So, I mean, with over time, it seems that one of the advantages of having episodes, there's not very many of them, I can assure you, but one of them is that one gets to know what's going on a bit more and one becomes more self-aware, and hopefully one can do something about it.
Thank you so much for explaining that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just, I've seen this from the outside, and I was thinking when you were describing the total psychosis, as you call it, that it was quite interesting because your whole outer demeanor changed according to what kind of psychosis you were in, So I didn't obviously know what he was thinking he was, or what was happening, which reality he was living in. But sometimes I could see that it changed very quickly, like the whole expression. Sometimes you were obviously having a good experience and you were in bliss, and then all of a sudden there was terror, or there was, all these kind of different things. And even like walking around in the apartment with his hands like this all the time. But luckily, and I didn't know why, he just did that. And the interesting thing though was that in this horrible time of like really intense psychosis, and all of a sudden you could snap out of it, and we could talk like we do now, and you could explain to me it's because I think I'm in prison and I have handcuffs. In that reality, I have handcuffs, and so it's like funny things. Not it wasn't really funny then, but now it's funny. Like I learned that I could if I could tell him that we're gonna take your handcuffs off now. So and then for a while he could actually use his hands, and then they were back on again. But things like that. It's just like it was. It's very strange to watch it happening. You just that you also play a part often in these different worlds. You just don't know what they are, and sometimes you were really, really afraid of me, and sometimes not. Sometimes it was I obviously played a good part. So yeah.
Oliver, you're very lucky you have a good partner. If you had a crappy partner, she might have told you like, yep, you're in prison, go sit in the closet, and like leave you in the closet for 12 hours or something. Oh my goodness. So I'm glad you're able to
lucky.
Yeah, you're very lucky. So Ellen, Oliver is a very kind soul, and I can't see him hurting a fly, but what you must have been afraid, at least for him at certain periods, right? Like, were you ever like afraid of what he might do to himself? Clearly he wouldn't like harm you or anybody around him, but that's just a perfect recipe of somebody who could really harm themselves in a quite severe way.
Absolutely, yes, I was sometimes very afraid of that. Not very often, luckily, but because as mad people go, I would say that you're very nice.
I'm a good man.
You're a good man.
And just very sweet in many ways, but clearly often very afraid. Um, um, but there were some incidences where it was very scary because he saw me as somebody very scary, and he would get so afraid that he would scream, for instance, and try to escape through the window. And so then that was very scary, because I actually had to hold him back. I didn't know if he was actually going to jump. Luckily we didn't live very high up, but high enough that he would have broken his legs or something like that. So obviously that's super scary. So things like that happened.
Yeah.
Wow,
it is.
interesting. Oliver, I want to talk to you a little bit about your journey with medications. This is definitely a mixed bag for so many people. There are amazing things that some of these medications can do. I've heard so many stories of people that were suicidal that began taking a medication, at least started to stabilize things. We know there's limitations and side effects and all kinds of crazy interactions between drugs. And so it's a complicated thing to talk about. But can you comment a little bit about your journey with different medications that you've been on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not anti-medication. In many ways, particularly with being diagnosed 30 years ago, lithium saved my life, and it enabled me to live a good life for many, many years because it stopped the episodes, and they were the worst part. So I was 17, I got really manic, ended up in a mental hospital. They gave me a drug called haloperidol, which I don't think they're so keen on now. It took me super, super low. I went into this horrible depression. They took me off it. I had horrible withdrawals for 2 weeks. And then they started giving me antidepressants. This was SSRIs in the early days. And they gave me a lot of love, and my parents were great. And it was all, got better and better. So I left mental hospital, and my psychiatrist, who's a great guy, he wanted to wait a bit before offering me lithium because, as a lot of people probably know, generally speaking, when people start lithium, they can't really stop it, particularly if they do it for a long time, because it can be just too difficult. People get too sick if they do that. So I think we waited about a year, and I started getting depressed again, and it was obvious I just wasn't very stable. So I went on lithium, I think when I was about 19, 18 and a half, 19. Now, when I went on lithium, I put on loads of weight. I put on about 20 kilos. which I thought was great because I'd always been very small for my age, and now I felt I was really tough. And luckily, after about 3 months, I started to sort of equalize, but I literally almost stayed in bed sleeping for 3.5 months. It was so weird. And because I was at university, no one really noticed or cared or, worried about that. I was just being a student, so that was quite weird. But then the long story short was that my psychiatrist, and I'm very grateful to him for doing this, he was very, very keen on me seeing myself as someone who could go into the world and have a life. He didn't obviously want me to see myself as a victim, which I think happens quite a lot these days in the mental health world, actually. I think maybe we could do with a bit more of that energy of, of course, there's times when we need to be shown a lot of compassion and love and kindness and gentleness, but there's also times when we need to be pushed and encouraged and given some goals, particularly for the guys. We need that. We need something ahead of us to get our teeth into. And so basically I live my life on lithium, and I didn't realize it at the time until I actually started coming off lithium about 10, 15 years later. But I had no more emotions. I didn't feel my emotions at all. I would get a lot of anger on lithium. So I got very angry and people would see me angry and I looked angry, whatever. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad once in 10 years. I didn't feel jealous. Like I could have a girlfriend, could be chatting to some good looking guy at a party. I'd just laugh about it. I thought it was because I was just very cool, but I didn't feel anything. Um, and I didn't notice this either because it happened to me at such a young age, and I wasn't particularly aware of my emotions or all that stuff back then. Um, and so it took away my emotional compass, and that caused a lot of problems because I couldn't really feel my way through life, which is what most people do. Most people have feelings, use their feelings as kind of signals as good, bad, should do this, shouldn't do that, whatever. So instead, I had to figure it all out intellectually. So I never felt love for anyone for these 15 years, these 10, 15 years. But I knew who I loved because they were nice to me. And so I would be nice to them. So I would like intellectualize the whole thing. I knew, luckily, because I'd, had a good upbringing and I was reasonably bright. I knew that if you do certain things, you get certain things. If you treat people well, you get friends, like all this stuff. But I intellectualized everything. I didn't feel a thing. Um, and this worked for a while, and it's possibly one of the reasons I got a job as a sales trader in an investment bank, because it's quite a good place to not have feelings. But yeah, it was pretty wild. But I guess after a certain period of time, it was just very obvious that people started telling me, "Oh, lithium, it's a dangerous drug. It's very toxic. It's, psychiatrists just dish it out." Like all these kind of, well, urban myths, depending on who you talk to. But I got afraid, and so I started investigating coming off it.
How did that go? It sounds like when you decided to come off it, you weren't working with a professional to be able to do that, and it was quite the scary ride. Do I have that correct in your story?
Yes and no. I mean, basically, yeah, I guess to go back, one of the weird things about being on lithium was it changes your personality and it changes the way one perceives the world, and it changes the decisions one makes. Like these things, no one thinks about this, no one talks about this, except in the bipolar world. But you become a different person, and so I wasn't really in a place to make good decisions about coming off medication because I was medicated. I was doped out of my head, and I found it really hard to use my brain and all this stuff. But I did luckily. No, the first time I came off it, I just did it by myself. And I thought, well, I'll go quite slowly. So I think I probably came off it over maybe 6 months, which I thought was a long time, without any investigations into this. We didn't really have the internet in that stage, and they certainly didn't think about talking to a psychiatrist, which would obviously have been a good start. But I came off it and I went completely mad. And I was in Australia at the time, living with 5 other meditation teachers. And I just basically trashed the house. I peed on their beds. I thought I was an angel who could like lick my fingers and touch the plants and they would, become everlasting, plants. I was rolling around on the grass naked whilst a family next door were having a barbecue. It was not great. And eventually, the police, they came, my friends came back, and I'd gone up on the roof of the house, and I was standing over the ledge looking down on the tarmac, like 2 stories down, thinking I'm an angel, knowing I was an angel, and I was about to jump and fly, and I bent my knees, and I didn't jump, thanks to the grace of God. I didn't jump because I'd have really hurt myself. It was tarmac below, and it was a good, yeah, 25, 30 foot drop. And then climbing down from the roof, I climbed down, I cut my stomach on a nail, and I jumped down, and I saw it was all bleeding, and I walked down and I thought, well, this is fine, because I'm the Messiah, I'm an angel, I'm Jesus reincarnated. And so I went into the kitchen, I got a piece of lemon, and I squeezed it on my stomach, which hurt like hell. Even during that, it hurt like hell. And then put children's plasters all over it and all over my body, and wrapped myself up in loo roll, kitchen toilet paper, and sat on the sofa. And my friends arrived, and probably were quite surprised with the sight they saw.
Quite surprised is probably the understatement of the year. That is insane. You could have really, really hurt yourself.
I could have done, yeah.
Oh,
Which
my
would have then
goodness.
made everything else more difficult, because I'd have had bipolar and had been busted up.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Well, thank you again for sharing that. That is quite the story. Ellen, I want to go back to you. When did the two of you kind of meet and start seeing each other? Where was this in Oliver's story?
Well, I think that was kind of not so long after you recovered after this episode. The first time he tried to be without medication, and it did go horribly wrong. And you sort of had recovered, more or less. And we met in Mexico, in the jungle in Mexico, all places, on a meditation retreat there. So yeah, we got together, basically.
Oh, for to carry your bags. You got to tell the story. You got to tell the story.
Yeah, so I showed up on Christmas Eve, didn't I?
Yeah. This beautiful woman turns up on Christmas Eve.
And there you were serving, because he was sort of helping out in the kitchen and stuff, and serving the dinner that actually, we didn't know it at that time, but it made me really sick. Like how you can get really sick in Mexico. But anyway, so afterwards we were chatting with a group of people, and I was going to live, my bed was kind of like a hut a little bit away, and he offered to carry my bags. And I knew exactly why he offered to carry my bags.
I was just a gentleman. I was just being a gentleman.
Yeah, exactly. We think we're
no intent whatsoever.
We think we're so sneaky. We're a very optimistic bunch, us males.
But then the more sinister part of it is that I got really sick, and I was like basically on this hut where nobody else were, and he came over every day to nurse me or chat to me, which I really appreciated. But we have a lot of fun with sort of telling each other that he actually poisoned me so that he could then be my savior afterwards.
She basically, thanks to Stockholm syndrome, she fell in love with me. So it all worked out.
That's amazing. If you're listening and not watching, you're missing out on the two of them looking at each other like lovebirds, like they just got married yesterday. It's so genuine and palpable. I can feel your love. For either one of you, getting into a committed relationship with the bipolar is kind of a background. Like that seems to me like a big deal. And obviously you love who you love and you get over whatever challenges people have. But for either one of you, was there any kind of reservation to getting into like a committed long-term relationship with knowing that this was kind of still there in the background and would sometimes be in the foreground as well?
That's for you, I think.
No, I would really like to hear you too.
All right, there we go.
I'd love to hear you. I asked you that.
Yeah. I don't think I really got a handle on bipolar until about 8 years ago, to be honest. I don't think I really had a clue what I was dealing with or what I had. So I didn't really think about that. I just thought she was very lucky that I was interested in her.
I think that's true, actually. But and I think because you didn't really in a way didn't take your diagnosis very much into account. It was kind of like, when I'm on lithium, I'm fine, and it doesn't really feature much in my life. So I'm sure you told me, but it was definitely not like a, oh, I have to confess this big thing, and are you okay with it? It wasn't like that at all. So I don't think I really thought much of it actually in the first years we were together. You described sort of like lithium as a salt that you needed to take, and it was pretty natural, and it wasn't, not a big deal. And you were definitely never coming off it again.
Yeah.
It was the story. So I think we both just kind of thought it was, fine. It wasn't really a deal. Looking back, we both can see that, stuff happened, or challenges in our relationship definitely were related to you having bipolar. And also probably being on lithium had effects that we didn't know was either the diagnosis or the medication at that time, but now we do, in a way. For instance, that you were so like, some days you were just like gray and didn't have any energy, and you were just like a shadow, in a way. Things like that, and that you could also, like, weird things like you got so confused, like sometimes that you even find your way back home to the place we'd lived for 3 years, things like that. And we were sort of kind of laughing, oh, that's just Ollie, kind of, or yeah, it's just we didn't just put two and two together. It was quite strange.
I mean, I remember starting a new job and I got to drive a van, and I was very excited about this. I thought vans are cool, vans are manly. And
Absolutely.
I drove this van and I parked in a multi-story car park, and I couldn't find it. I left it for 30 seconds. I literally went over to buy a ticket. I came back. I couldn't even remember what the van looked like. And I didn't have one of those keys that you could press, and I ended up I couldn't phone my boss. I just started this job. There's no way. So I phoned up Ron and I was like, I've lost the van. What do I do? And she starts laughing. And I think we've managed to get away with a lot with bipolar by laughing about it, if I'm honest. And she said, right, you've just got to start in a corner and just walk around and just you'll find it. You're bound to find it. So I was given confidence, and so I did actually find the van, which was lucky. But it was wild not being able to.
That is very lucky. That would have been a short.
It would have been a short job. It would have been. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's a great story. And part of that leads me to kind of the next part of the story, which is you kind of feeling like you were getting things figured out. You eventually wrote the book Befriending Bipolar. What was that part of the journey like, to feel like you had realized that this was something that was going to be with you, and you needed to, like the title of the book, I think, is beautiful. Befriend. You had to kind of come to terms with it and understand that that was part of the journey. How did you kind of recovering in your mind, like from bipolar, how did that journey kind of kick off?
Well, COVID happened, and just before COVID, a friend of mine called Pear, he said to me, he'd seen me in psychosis and he'd seen all this stuff going. He said, you really should write a book about this. It could help a lot of people if you write a book about this. And I got angry, and I was just like, no way, I'm not going there. I'm done with all that shit, But it hit me. It hit me there when he said it, and I kind of knew. I was like, oh no, this is okay. And then COVID hit, and it was actually Ellen who said to me, why don't you write a book on bipolar? I can help you. And thank God she was there to edit it, because you can imagine, if I can't find a van, I can't edit chapters. Jesus, you know what I mean? So I basically wrote it. I had a lot of fun writing it, because I always think it's fun when we do things. I think it's really important to make them as fun as possible. And sometimes I flirt a bit with the whole sort of bipolar image of sort of looking a little bit mad to people. And so what I would do to write the book is I would go to this very posh hotel in Oslo where they serve like tea and coffee and hot chocolate and stuff. And I dress up in a smart tweed jacket and these nice sort of velvety trousers and a tie, and like looking like, I said to her, I said to Ellen, look, if I look like an author, it's bound to be good for the book. Kind of half joking, not taking myself too seriously. But anyway, I would go down to this place, and they thought I was some sort of very important author or whatever, because I kind of gave that impression, and that was kind of where I wrote the book, or at least a lot of it. And then I'd come back and I'd discuss it with Ellen, and we'd go through it, and she would remember a lot of things I couldn't remember, and we sort of figured it all out. And I think it's a fantastic book. I'm really grateful for it. And also grateful there were 3 or 4 friends who actually proofread it and gave me advice. And so it was actually a team effort. I mean, I'm lucky because I get the praise and the royalties from it. But I was very much helped by these wonderful people in my life, you know.
Yeah,
Mm.
I love that. What were some of the key points and things you wanted people to take away from that as far as like, again, befriending bipolar?
Well, the main point of the book is that although it's understandable to fight a mental illness, if you can get into a place where you can accept it, then that's really where I think things can move forward more easily and more gracefully. So the kind of the journey of acceptance, and also the message that you can't actually force yourself to accept. You know, you might have to fight the illness for a few years, and then you get to a place where you've just suffered too much. You're like, I have to just give in to this. I have to ask for help. I have to put whatever boundaries in my life to just sort of take this mental illness seriously. And in many ways, it was my journey of growing up. It was my journey of going from being a boy into a man, because that's really what bipolar did for me. You know, there's a lot of men around today who are 40, 50, 60, and they're still kids. You know, they've got weird, strong views about odd things, and they spend too much time on the internet, and they're angry and they're disillusioned. And, you know, there's a lot of that in the world. And that's because they haven't grown up. Because a real man who's grown up will take responsibility for themselves, will take responsibility for the people around them. They will also try to find fun in life. That's another thing that men offer a lot in relationships, is they offer the fun and the laughter, and 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 also to be protective of the people around, and to realize that we have an innate responsibility as men to um, to be good in this world, to be good men, and to contribute in a positive way, and to stand up for what we believe in. And sometimes, sometimes to get angry, and sometimes to be very, very gentle and kind. But the book talks quite a lot about that, and it talks a lot about how I had to completely reevaluate my life and look at my values and what was important to me, and decide what my priorities were. Yeah. There's
Mm.
also lots of sort of tips and hints of things that I've done that worked and things I've done that didn't work. And again, we're all different, and different things work to different people. But I think it can be quite helpful to read it and just have some of those contextualized a bit, so that people can then explore them if they want to.
I love that.
Yeah. Mm.
I really love that. Wow. Thank you for sharing. With the acceptance piece, you're making me think of one of my all-time favorite books, which is Winnie the Pooh and The Tao of Pooh, which I absolutely love. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but they take
Yeah.
an excerpt from the book that talks about how a creek kind of bounces around and flows really fast and is really chaotic. And as it matures and grows, it becomes a river and kind of loses that chaotic sense of itself. And the river says to itself, like, we know where we're going. There's no rush. We'll get there one day. And the point that the book makes is more like, we have this life and we're trying to improve and we want to get better, but we don't need to force it so hard on ourselves all the time. We can accept that we are where we are, and we can use the challenges that we have as opportunities. And it for me, it's kind of a reminder of like, yes, I want to push, I want to get things done, I want to accomplish things. I wish wasn't stuck in certain ways, but also remembering like, there's time. We can progress with this. We can accept the things that we have. And hearing the premise of your book just kind of reminds me of that as an example.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've learned through meditating a lot, and one of the things I experience, is that we're much more powerful when we relax and we move with intention rather than force. It's much better to move from a place of power, inner power, than it is to just force things. And I think that's a journey a lot of people just learn through working, actually, and banging their head against a wall. But it's interesting, the meditation has been a tremendous help to me, particularly when I'm well, if I'm honest. Really, it doesn't work when I'm in an episode or whatever. I'm just too gone. But it's allowed me to connect with this still, quiet, peaceful place that exists within me and exists within everyone. And the more I've connected with that, and it's become like a magnet, and it's like it kind of sucks me into it. And now I pretty much live from that place. I wake up in the morning and I generally feel happy for no reason. A little bit happier after the first coffee, if I'm honest,
Of course.
but generally happy for no reason. And it's almost like it unlocks this ability to really start to know ourselves and really move into our true self. And that's been tremendously useful with writing the book and with bipolar in general, because when we're thinking all day about stuff, we can't be ourselves. We're run by our mind. We're run by this entity that isn't us. But when we start to realize that we're not our thoughts and we're not our feelings, but we're this aliveness that exists within us, that's really when life starts to get exciting. And I think without that aspect, I think I'd be in a lot of trouble with this mental illness.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's very beautiful. I love that. Another cool part about your story is, you wrote the book, and immediately after, for at least a good year and a half, you made lots of different appearances. Obviously, promoting the book, people wanted to learn about it. It was wonderful that you were getting the message out. Up until about the end of 2023, there were quite a few different episodes that you were on. I've listened to several of them, and it's a wonderful story. And it sounds like a success story at that point. Like, here you are, you've written the book, you're managing things, you're much happier, you've got advice to offer people, you're being vulnerable with your own story, which is on its own, I think, absolutely amazing. But it's curious because also there's no mention of metabolic psychiatry, there's no mention of nutrition or diet or anything. And so there's this whole different world that you must have stumbled upon at some point between then and now. So can you guys kind of tell us about what it was like to hear the term metabolic psychiatry or a therapeutic ketogenic diet? That must have been quite the shock to hear about after you've accomplished so much without it.
Yeah, you look
I'll
at
say
me.
I'll say one thing and then
Yeah.
Well, one thing is that when I did all this podcast and stuff, mentally I was in a very good place. Physically I was falling apart. I
Really?
was I was lying in bed for 1.5, 2, 3 hours most days, just
Wow.
tired. I had migraines twice a week. This is all side effects from the lithium. And I was super confused. I'd started doing a course at Edinburgh University and I was about to give it up because I just couldn't do it. I was in a really bad way physically, but I sort of managed to find this happiness and this peace mentally, which I was really quite grateful for. But anyway, I'll pass over to you.
No, yeah, that's true, and I think in many ways the book the is about you going from sort of being not in denial, because that's not correct, but not sort of like we sort of mentioned before, that you didn't really take bipolar into account. You lived as if you didn't have it in a way, and then it sort of caught up on us, and the side effects from medication caught up on you, and you wanted to reduce or come off the medication, and that didn't go well. And it was this waking up of to reality in a way, like, okay, so this is actually real.
Yeah.
And this has to be managed, this doesn't go away. And it was tough for a while, and then you sort of landed in this acceptance that, okay, this is the deal. I'm going to work with it instead of against it. And a lot of good came from that, in very many ways. But true, that it didn't take away a lot of the physical suffering. It was more like, okay, I have to surrender to this. That's the way I saw it. That you decided, I have to surrender to the medication and side effects and all of that, because this is reality and I'm okay with that. So there was peace with it, but the journey with keto is more of a healing journey, isn't it? And it came through the study you're doing at the Edinburgh University. There was this pilot study on ketogenic diet for bipolar people.
Yeah. By Nicole Needham and Ian Campbell were the main people.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and you being you obviously said yes. That's kind of you saying yes, and then realizing what you've done afterwards. But yeah, it was cool. We did get a lot of help with it, which was brilliant. A lot of information, and but
Helen.
Yeah, you had a nutritionist issue.
Yeah.
It was very cool, but still, it was easy for you, because, you know, like with the medication, probably primarily, there's this like mental sort of blur and confusion. So to measure food and understand how many carbs you have and all that, it's really not very easy. So I think I rescued.
I think you rescued me.
And also cooked a lot of food, basically.
Yeah.
So, but it was fun too, you know, to experiment with it, and particularly because it had such a big effect quite early on. I mean, after 3 weeks or something.
I think it was after 3 days I started getting really chilled out.
Yeah.
I think, well,
I can't
I say
remember.
3 days. She's the one who actually knows what happens. So 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a bit of time to get into ketosis. And I don't think you were there 3 days.
No, I think I got that wrong.
Yeah. But that doesn't matter. But anyways, it really, like the way you described it was like your brain was taking a warm bath.
Oh, it was just lovely. It was lovely. It was like, oh my God, I didn't know I could feel like this. Yeah.
Wow.
It was great. Part of that was ketosis, but also part of it was my lithium overdosing, because that's obviously one of the things that can happen with a keto diet is the side effects get greater because we need less of the drug. So I lowered it a bit, and I still kept that lovely, warm, sort of alive feeling. But the tiredness and the migraines and things started over time to disappear and reduce, and that was amazing, because that actually, it's like I had my happiness and my peace, but I didn't have a life, and now I'm getting my life back, and it supports my happiness and my peace too, quite honestly. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing.
That's fantastic. You hear this story all the time, and I just think about my own journey. You know, for me, it was the step from keto to carnivore that my anxiety fell out. And I didn't have severe anxiety. I was never prescribed anything or diagnosed with anything, but just the feeling of like the way Ian Campbell describes it, like he's riding on a bus and he looks out the window and things are just great for no reason. And it's like the first time it occurs to him that like he wasn't feeling low or depressed. It's so wonderful to hear these stories. When you said yes to that study, had you heard anything about keto or the ketogenic diet, or were you just like, sure, let's do this?
I thought it was a computer game.
Are you serious?
No, I'd never heard of it. No, I never.
I think that's true though.
Okay,
because,
I had heard of it.
Because I'm Mrs. Try every diet ever that's available, yeah. and because of my own sort of minor health stuff though. But
minor obsessive compulsive disorder with food.
But anyway, so I definitely, you know, I was into the bulletproof coffee and that kind of thing. So I knew about it, and I think I sort of experimented with it for a while. But I didn't, you know, I don't have a mental illness, so I didn't really need.
Not usually.
Not usually, no, just occasionally. But no, I didn't really need it. So I sort of gave it up, and you didn't want to try it at that time, I think, or whatever. But it had been sort of mentioned, or you know, at least I knew about it sort of vaguely.
Well, then I had heard about it, but I hadn't realized I'd heard about it. It sounded very new and exciting to me.
Got it. Ellen, when you tried it,
sorry, you go.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, the idea of going to hospitals and getting MRI scans and being like asked about myself loads was very appealing.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So Ellen, what was your motivation? 100% you're going to do this diet because Oliver was doing it, or was it like a mix? Like, well, I've heard of this diet, maybe I should give it another go, and you thought it might be beneficial for you as well, or was it pretty much you're just going to try this because Oliver needs to do this?
Truth be known, I didn't do it. I think I went sort of low carb, but I didn't do the whole thing. I just love fruit a lot.
Understandable.
So yeah, so I didn't actually, but I managed to sort of actually I think I mainly cooked in that period. So. And I think because I sort of love cooking, and I think it's interesting with different restrictions in a way to make it tasty and delicious and nutritious and everything. So I think I ate basically what you ate, but I just added a bit of, I didn't have as much fat, and I did have more sort of healthy carbs. So yeah, that's how we solved it, really.
Basically, she's an angel, and I'm blessed. I wouldn't be here if she wasn't here. There's no way. And I certainly wouldn't be having nearly as much fun.
That's wonderful. I love it. So with this new information that you didn't have when you wrote the book, do you think a revised, edition of your book is on the horizon? Where, I mean, you're obviously sharing this and being very vocal about it, and coming onto podcasts like ours, and you have a wonderful YouTube channel with really great videos. By the way, I really love the videos you put on your YouTube channel. Kind of shorter and explain things really well. But like, do you think you'll end up revising your book or adding a chapter that talks about metabolic psychiatry, or are you quite happy to kind of leave that where it is, be happy with it, and find other ways to kind of share the message?
No, I've actually already added quite a section, I think 4 or 5 pages, about the keto diet and its effect on me. I had to do that as soon as possible because I don't want to put that book out there with such a big part of it missing. I mean, I believe that for a lot of people, the keto diet or the carnivore diet can, well, I mean, people don't use the word cure, do they? Because doctors get awfully precious about it. But put mental illness into remission for a long, long time. And so for me, like my sort of chief message when I get out there is, if you can learn to accept bipolar, it's a really good start. And the things that have really helped me are keto and meditation and a bit of psychotherapy as well, when you sort of combining those three. And so I've changed the book. You can do that when it's published on Amazon, so I can go in there and change it, which is great. So I guess for the last 6 months, it's had the keto thing in it. I would love to write another book on keto. I knew, having been studying at Edinburgh University and stuff, my brain was quite fried. And so at the moment, I'm writing a comedy book because I just kind of need to do that. I just need to make myself laugh, and hopefully some other people too. But yeah, I hope there's a lot more books in the pipeline about this whole area and about whatever kind of comes to me.
Yeah, me too. Let's talk about the award. When did you first hear about the Fresh Start Award given out by Metabolic Mind? And when did you decide, like, hey, I think I've got a chance at this. Let me take a crack at it.
Well, a friend of mine, I was having coffee with him, and he told me about it. He said, yeah, there's this award that they give to people who've had struggles mentally, and they want to sort of support you moving forward. And I thought, oh, that's cool. So I kind of lodged it somewhere in my memory, and then it disappeared. And then for some weird reason, I went on Twitter, which I never normally do because I actually don't understand Twitter. I have not figured out how to work it. So I went on Twitter and I saw this advert, this really cool lady called Hannah Warren talking about the metabolic mind thing. And I was like, that's what my friend told me about. And I was like, right, this has come to me twice. I got to go for it. And so I put in the application, which was actually really good fun, doing the video, writing things down. And I find that when I write about bipolar or I do an application like that I actually get a lot out of it. I find it's quite healing. It's often quite clarifying. And so, yeah, that's when I put it in. And then I can't remember how long, but afterwards it was, but I got the message that I was one of the winners. And I also heard something that didn't surprise me, was that Jan Bazuki and her guys had decided to give more awards out than they'd originally wanted to, which was incredibly generous and just shows where they're coming from, how much they care. And yeah, and I just thought, this is amazing, because even the people who interviewed me for the Basuki Award, they were lovely. They were fun. They had good sense of humor. One of the things I find so much within I guess you could call it the mental health world if you want to be optimistic, but within worlds where people have really suffered, is that so many of them have such good sense of humors, and they have such a good approach to life because they kind of know how bad it can be, and they don't really sweat the small stuff nearly as much as some other people do. And so, yeah, it's just been lovely. The whole thing has just been surrounded by good people.
Wow. Well, congratulations. Obviously, you're very deserving of the award. I'm curious to know what you think your plans are. What do you think you're going to do with the money? And yeah, how do you envision that looking?
Well, I'm hopefully going to finish my master's degree at Edinburgh University in the psychology of mental health. Definitely been struggling with that. I still take lithium. I take a lot less lithium than I used to take, but it still has quite a big effect on me. But hopefully I'll be able to get through that. I'm doing it part-time, and the university have been very helpful, very kind. I want to write at least one other book on my experiences with keto and bipolar and what's going to work for me. Something quite practical that can really help people. And this YouTube channel I'm having so much fun. I can totally see why you do this. Like, it's great. I mean, it's such a great opportunity to be creative. And I couldn't really be creative for many, many years because of the lithium. It just stopped me being creative. I had been an artist, I'd written things, I was always coming up with ideas. I was one of those sort of like slightly mad professor types, and that just stopped. And then when I managed to get on a lower dose of lithium, thanks to keto, primarily, thanks to keto diet, um, my creativity started coming back, and now I can do YouTube channel like regularly. I could do the odd video for here and there, but then I'd be tired for ages and whatever. And now I have more energy and more ability to sort of conceptualize things. And I'm hoping I'm hoping the channel gets really big and just gets to a lot of people, and that it doesn't just spread stuff about bipolar and what's worked for me and whatever, but it also the way I see the world, the way I think that we can help humanity, the way I think we can change things in the world to make them better. There's a lot about spirituality I'm hoping to put in there, and how approaching life from an individual perspective of, if I can find more peace, then I really can make a difference in the world, even if I don't do big things. These kind of messages, I'd love to have a platform to kind of get them out there. And also the humor part. I've made a couple of like funny videos and stuff, and I'm a bit twitchy because it seems like the younger generation's a little bit precious about sense of humor, and it's quite easy to get cancelled. But I figure if I go out there as someone with bipolar, they'll feel a bit sorry for me and they won't cancel me. So that's my plan.
Good
Either
strategy.
that, or they'll think I'm hypomanic, and then they'll have to actually give me pity rather than cancel me. I'm not sure, but something's going to happen.
It's a great strategy. I love it.
Thanks.
Yeah, it is wonderful the way YouTube allows you to express yourself and get that message out there. And yeah, hopefully you don't get canceled with all the stuff you're putting out there. Ellen, this question is for you after seeing the changes that your husband has gone through, all the different steps, not just the diet, but obviously, the meditation and, the befriending side of things and writing the book and inspiring people, and then adding the diet, even if it's not the exact diet that you're going to do or that you're going to do long term or anything like that. Like seeing the difference in Oliver, your partner, how does that make you, and how does that motivate you to help Oliver and support Oliver to kind of stay on this diet?
Oh, totally. I'm 100% behind it, and I do what I can to help you with it. And now also you're so much more. It's so much easier now. In the beginning, it was a little bit of a struggle and missing the chips and I don't know what it was, and not not finding it easy to stay on the diet, but that has changed too, so it's much easier. But yeah, no, and I'm glad that it is, because I can see that it's helping. It definitely is very, very good, very good for you. So yeah, I mean, I support you in every way I can with that. So, and it's going really well.
And I mean, you're low carb. I mean, you're not far off.
Yeah. A bit on and off, if I'm honest. But you got to find what sort of works for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do believe in the healthy whole food scene, so and even you even went on carnivore for a while, and that was fun. I mean, if you'd asked me like a few years ago, I probably thought it was madness, but you
Me too.
yeah, but you were thriving on it.
I loved carnivore. I felt like a very, very happy animal. It was just like, oh, this is amazing. And I lost 6 kilos of fat, and I put on muscle. I can't train at the moment, issues. But but I still even put on muscle. It was amazing. I was looking good. I was looking hot. And Zoolander. And
Ooh,
yeah,
Blue
yeah.
Steel.
But it was really good for me. And it may be that my intention is to do carnivore for a couple of months every year if I can. I think if I had a bit more willpower, I could do it more. I thought it was tremendous, actually. I felt so alive, so calm. My sleep was fantastic. I had more energy. I could think more clearly. It was truly amazing. Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was terrific. But at the moment, I'm just sort of chilling on keto.
Cool.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm so happy because that means we can have meals together,
Yeah.
which I really like. Because I don't have any plans on going carnivore. I'm not very attracted to that. So
That's okay. More steak for us. That's fine.
yeah, totally. Yeah, but it's nice to be able to share meals sometimes.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And I love the definition of, a carnivore in nature is consuming at least 70 to 75% of their calories from animal products, which gives so much wiggle room. I think it helps, embrace that we should have more animal products and in particular, fat and protein together without getting caught up in like the nuance of like you were saying, Ellen, like, if you're having a little bit of fruit, that's fine for most people. For people that are a little bit more on the addictive kind of side, it doesn't do well with me, but like you said, finding what's most important is great. And I think anything in the low carb kind of umbrella, finding whatever is best for you is a really great place to be. And whether that's 100% strict carnivore or even just, again, just having more animal foods in the diet, I think is really important. Okay, so I'm saying this with permission from Robin. Robin Dobbins is a good friend of mine. She's also a winner of the 2024 Fresh Start Award. We talk all the time. 2024 was a very difficult year for her. She lost her mom. And, the holidays came and she was kind of dabbling in things that were off her diet. For her, she knows she needs to be fairly strict on carnivore. I've been with her at different dinners at different conferences. And, even things like, an excess of spices or things like that can really throw her off. Now, we were talking about this and kind of going back and forth. And I kind of made the point to her that, like, we look at people that suffer with mental illnesses and they get to this point where they find metabolic psychiatry and you fix all these problems, and we look at you and we think like, oh, Robin, you're done, you figured it out, you know what you're going to be on for the rest of your life. Oliver, you've got it sorted out, like you don't need to worry about this anymore, you're completely cured. And having that conversation with her was really eye-opening to know that the way she said it was like, it's always in the back of our minds that like we could slip and we could go right back to where we were. And that slip is, it's all around you. It's donuts and desserts and the chips and all the amazing foods that are very tasty around you. So on a serious note, like, how are you worried about that? Does that make you nervous that, it could be a very quick and very slippery slope to go back to kind of the way things were before?
It's a good question. I haven't really thought about it. I don't feel like I'm living on a precipice. Like, I think if I started, eating a lot of carbs again, well, I know that, for example, if I have like a whole apple, which would put me out of ketosis, then the next day I'm fine. It doesn't make a difference. But if I had a chocolate bar, the next day I might have anxiety or I might wake up feeling pretty down. It's like it's definitely more noticeable. So I don't I haven't tested it to its limits because I'm not interested in doing that. But I don't feel like I'm living on a precipice because, if I break the diet, which I do sometimes, I kind of know I'm doing it. And for me anyway, I guess it's individual, but for me, I can very easily recommit and just get back. And having a morning where I feel a bit down is not the end of the world for me. So I don't really worry about that. It was strange, when I first went on the keto diet, it was hard for me because lithium was messing with my brain and it was just hard for me. But after 3 or 4 months of being on it, I came off it. I just slipped off it and I was fine for a few months actually. And then I started noticing the anxiety coming in and I noticed I was more edgy and just not, my sleep wasn't as good. And I woke up one morning and I was lying in bed and it was like being thumped in the heart. It was like, I got to do keto. This is it. And it's like I was ready then. I was no longer doing something I was asked to do or something people thought I should do. I was like, I was ready. And I haven't stopped since. And so it's been very easy. And I feel lucky about that because it didn't feel like it was my decision. it felt like it was almost made for me.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that perspective. You guys, this has been a wonderful conversation. Oliver, I'm so grateful for your journey and being so willing to be vulnerable about it and share it, write the book, and even take that a step further with the diet. And Ellen, we're so glad that you were able to join us as well today and to hear your perspective and the things that you went through and to help kind of clarify the situation, I think is really wonderful. I'm so proud of both of you for going through this and again, being willing to share this has been wonderful. It's been such a great conversation. Oliver, Ellen, I'm not sure if you're going to want people reaching out to you, but we'll start with Oliver. Oliver, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
I'd love people to go onto my YouTube channel, which is called Thriving with Bipolar. You've got to put Oliver Seligman into the search engine. I don't think you get it if you put Thriving with Bipolar in. It's not big enough yet. You can also find my website, which is oliverseligman.com. And thanks for listening. If you got this far, I'm very impressed. And Casey, thank you too. You've been brilliant. You've been a great interview, and you've been lovely and sensitive and fun and cool. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. It's very kind. It's been an honor to host you both. Ellen, are you quite comfortable to have everybody just reach out to Oliver and not reach out to you?
Oh, totally. Yeah. But if people want to do something, reach out, they can come to Bergen in March and see my opera.
Beautiful. That sounds amazing. We missed that entire part of the episode. What is that all about?
No, I'm directing a contemporary opera performance in a town called or city called Bergen in March.
Which theatre? What dates?
12th and 13th of March.
And which theatre?
It's in a festival called the Borealis Festival.
Borealis Festival, Bergen, Norway.
Borealis Festival.
Borealis.
Yeah.
That's amazing. We just wasted this whole hour talking about Oliver. We could have been talking about your opera.
I'm so much more interesting.
That's fantastic. I'm actually going to tag that in the show notes for sure. That's amazing that you're doing that. That sounds amazing. I hope to find myself somewhere around Bergen in Norway at that time. But yeah, anyway, to both of you, thank you so very much for taking the time to be on our show today. It's been a lovely chat and we really appreciate both of you. So thank you both so very much.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
And we'll see ya. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.